Ruthless bikers harassed a black cleaning lady in the pub bathroom, completely unaware that action star Jason Statham was in one of the stalls. Miller's pub sat quiet in the fading daylight, its golden rays highlighting worn wooden surfaces and faded photographs that adorned the walls. Alina Miller, a woman in her early 30s with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, moved with practiced efficiency behind the bar. Her hands calloused from years of work methodically down the bar top. The soft squeak of her cleaning cloth, the only sound in the empty establishment as she worked, Alina's mind wandered too. The familiar routine that awaited her thepub had been in her family for generations, and now with her father's health declining, the responsibility ruining it fell squarely on her shoulders. It was a burden she bore without complaint, driven by love and a deep-seated sense of duty. Finishing with the bar, Alina made her way to a small room tucked behind the main area of the pub. She paused at the doorway, taking a moment to compose herself before entering. The room was dimly lit, dominated by a hospital-style bed where her father, Frank Miller, lay, resting. The steady hiss of oxygen from a nearby canister provided a constant backdrop to the scene. "Dad," Alina called softly. As she approached the bed, "How are you feeling?" Frank's eyes flickered open, a ghost of a smile crossing his weathered face as he saw his daughter. He couldn't speak, hadn't been able to for months now. Booth's eyes still held the warmth and strength that had always defined him. His fingers twitched slightly, moving towards the wheelchair positioned near the bed. Alina understood immediately. "Ready? Tog it up." "Huh," she said, her voice gentle but with forced cheerfulness. "Let's get you settled, then it's almost time to open up with practiced movements." Alina helped head her father from the bed to the wheelchair. It was a delicate process, one that required care and patience. Frank was a shadow of his former self, his once robust frame now frail and weakened by illness, but there was still fight in him, evident in the way he tried to assist with the transfer, despite his limitations. Once Frank was settled in the wheelchair, oxygen tubes carefully arranged, Alina wheeled him out into the main area of the pub. She positioned him behind the cash register where he could oversee the evening's activities. It was a spot he had occupied for decades, and even now, in his diminished state, it seemed to bring him comfort. "There we go," Lena said, placing the small bell within Frank's reach. "Dad, you've been relying on that soft grunt of yours for ages, but I've always thought the bell would be easier on you. Just give it a ring if you need anything, okay?" Once for yes and twice for no, Frank's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly in acknowledgement, accompanied by a familiar soft grunt. Alina rolled her eyes with a fond smile. Mused by her father's stubbornness, she chose not to push the issue, deciding to let him stick with whichever method of communication he preferred, be it the bell or Thegrant, though she believed the bell might make things clearer at times. Alina had grown adept at interpreting his subtle gestures and sounds, understanding them as a language uniquely their own. With her father settled, Alina turned her attention to the final preparation for opening. She moved around the pub with ease of long familiarity, flipping the sign on the wooden front door from closed to open, replacing the register print paper and organizing the small change in its various compartments as she worked. Alina kept Upala running commentary more for her own benefit than her father's. "Looks like it might be a quiet night," she mused, glancing out at the empty street beyond the pub's windows. "But you never know, right? Maybe we'll get a surprise or two." Frank's eyebrows raised again, this time accompanied by a soft grunt that Ellen interpreted as agreement. She paused in her work, turning to face him with a gentle smile. "How about some dinner, Dad? Are you feeling up to your porridge?" Another raised eyebrow. "Anna Thurgrant?" "Yes." Alina nodded, moving to the small kitchenette area. Behind the bar, she worked quickly, preparing a milk porridge in a plastic cup, easy for Frank to manage with a straw. As she stirred the mixture, Esh found herself lost in thought. Memories of busier times in the pub washing over her, times when her father's booming laugh would fill the room, when the clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation provided a constant soundtrack to their evenings. Those days seemed far away, now replaced by a quiet routine of care and the constant worry that gnawed at the edges of Elena's consciousness. But she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. Her father needed her, and the pub needed her. That was enough. Returning to Frank with the prepared porridge, Alina helped him take small sips through the straw. It was a slow process, punctuated by pauses for Frank to catch his breath. Alina filled the silence with gentle encouragement and idle chatter about the day's events, maintaining the illusion of normally as best she could. They were halfway through the porridge when the chime above the door rang out, arrival of their first customer of the evening. Alina looked up, her practiced welcoming smile already in place, but as she took in the figure entering the pub, the smile faltered, replaced by a look of stunned recognition. The man who had just walked in was tall and bald, dressed in a black leather jacket and jeans. His face was one Alina had seen countless times on movie posters and television. Screens it was a face that belonged to red carpets and Hollywood premieres, not to the worn wooden floors of Miller's Pub. It was Jason Statham for a moment. Alina Frazine scratched her eyes in disbelief, her mind struggling to reconcile the presence of the action movie star with familiar surroundings of the pub. She blinked, half expecting the apparition to disappear, but Jason Statham remained moving with quiet purpose, towards a corner seat near the window. There in the shadow, he was almost hidden. Elena's heart raced as she sat down, Thepridge cup giving her father a quick, wide-eyed look that communicated her shock more effectively than words ever cowed. Frank's eyebrows rose, a hint of amusement visible in his tired eyes. Taking a deep breath to compose herself, Alina smoothed down her apron and approached Jason's table. She was to maintain her professional demeanor despite the surreal nature of the situation. "Good evening, sir," she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Welcome to Miller's Pub. What can I get for you?" Jason looked up, a tired smile crossing his face. "Evening," he replied, his voice carrying the growly tone that was so familiar from his films. "I'll have a pint of your best, please." Alina nodded, jotting down the order more out of habit than necessity. "Coming right up," she said, turning to head back to the bar. As she poured the beer, Elena's mind dressed with questions. Why was Jason Statham here in their small out-of-the-way establishment? Was he filming nearby? Was he on the way to someplace? But she pushed these thoughts aside, focusing instead on providing the best service she could. Celebrity or not, he was a customer, and customers deserved her full attention. Returning to the table with the pint, Alina set it down carefully. "Here you are, sir," she said. "Let me know if you need anything." Goals. Jason nodded his thanks, and Alina retreated, leaving him to his solitude. Could sense that he was here for some peace and quiet, and she was determined to respect that no matter how curious she might be. Back at the bar, as she waited for new customers, Alina couldn't help but steal glances at their famous guest. Whenever the opportunity arose, she noticed the weariness in his posture, the way he seemed to retreat into the shadows of his corner seat. It made her wonder what kind of day he'd endured, and what pressures and demands accompanied a life of such fame. Was he researching a Rollius, a small-town bartender? Had he simply gotten lost on his way to a more glamorous destination? The possibilities seemed endless, each more unlikely than the last. Presence of Jason Statham in their humble pub felt like a dream, a brief intersection of their quiet world with glittering realm of Hollywood. Frank let out a grunt, but Alina didn't notice her mind was elsewhere, her gaze drifting toward the corner of the bar. A soft chime from the bell that he flicked snapped her back to reality. Turning quickly, she saw her father eyeing the half-finished cup of porridge on his tray. "Sorry, Dad," Eleanor murmured. Stepping over to his side, she helped guide the straw to his lips, patiently assisting him as he finished the rest of his meal. When the cup was empty, Frank grunted again, this time with a note of satisfaction. He ginkily pointed toward the jar of nuts, crackers, and cheese sticks on the counter, and shifted his eyes toward Alina. She followed his gaze and paused, puzzled for a moment, before understanding his intent. Father wanted her to bring the snacks over to their famous guest. "I got you, Dad," she said softly, offering him a small smile. Frank's eyebrows were slightly raised, and the faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. It wasn't much, but it was enough to confirm what she already knew. He was just as amazed and quietly thrilled by their celebrity guest as she was. Alina reached for the jar of nuts, crackers, and cheese sticks, her hands steady as she selected a small ceramic plate. With deliberate care, she arranged the snacks neatly, her movements unhurried in the calm stillness of the evening. Though no other guests or regulars had arrived, she remained intent on delivering her best service to the solitary customer. The bell above the door of Miller's Pub chimed and broke her focus from the plate. Alina turned, her welcoming smile already in place, ready to greet the new arrival, but as she took in the sight of the men entering the pub, her smile faltered. The atmosphere in the room seemed to shift, the peaceful quiet of the evening shattered by the heavy tread-off boots on the worn wooden floor. Elena's heart sank as she recognized the newcomers. The bikers had arrived, and with them came a wave of tension that threatened to overwhelm the tranquil evening she had been enjoying. Taking a deep breath, Alina glanced at her father beside her. Seeing the concern in his eyes, she jumped to her feet and told her father that it is best that he returns to his room and let her handle this situation. After quickly placing the cup in the sink, she carefully maneuvered his wheelchair, pushing him back to his room. She helped him settle onto the bed, adjusting the oxygen tube over his nostrils with practiced ease. Alina gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder before stepping away. She left the room, the door clicking behind her, and returned to the bar outside. Elena's body tensed instinctively, her hands gripping the edge of the bar as she watched the scene unfold. Two muscular men in black leather vests, emblazoned with biker insignia, had made their way inside, their heavy boots echoing ominously against the wooden floor. They exuded an air of menace. Their eyes scanning the room with predatory intent behind them came their leader, a larger man whose very presence seemed to command attention and fear in equal measure. Elena's gaze flickered briefly to Jason, who was watching the proceedings with a mixture of curiosity and concern, his posture a straining alertness, replacing the relaxed demeanor he had displayed moments ago. She silently prayed Hugh wouldn't get involved, celebrity or not. She didn't want him caught up in the mess that was about to unfold. The lighter off, the bikers, a man Elena knew only as Iron, moved with deliberate steps towards the table. His actions were calculated, unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world and knew that no one would dare to rush him. He reached for the open sign hanging in the window, flipping Ito closed with a casual flick of his wrist, then using the key that hung nearby, a key that Elena suddenly regretted leaving so accessible, he locked the door with a decisive click. Sound of the lock engaging seemed to echo through the pub, and Elena felt a chill run down her spine. They were trapped now, cut off from the outside world. Whatever was about to happen would play out within these four walls. With no chance of interruption or rescue, Iron turned from the door, his gaze sweeping over the pub's emptiness, but he didn't notice Jason in the corner, shrouded in shadow. Assuming he was just a regular, he didn't give him a second thought. Instead, his focus sharpened on Elena, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. Well, he drawled, his voice alluring. That seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Looks like it's payday, boys. He settled himself at a near-biteable, sprawling in the chair as if he owned the place with a jerk of his head. He signaled to his two companions handlight. He commanded the simple phrase, carrying clear menace. The two bikers approached the bar, their movements in trend and threatening. Elena stood her ground, forcing herself to meet their gaze despite the fear churning in her stomach. We're here to see your father, one of them, a man with a scar running down his left cheek, announced Frank. Time to settle up, he called. Elena swallowed hard, fighting to keep her voice steady. I'm afraid that's not possible, she said, gesturing towards her father's wheelchair. As you can see, my father's not in any condition to deal with business matters. The scarred biker sneered. That's not our problem, sweetheart. Your old man borrowed money for all those medical equipment and tanks, and now it's time to pay up. Plus, there's the matter of your protection fees. You're 3 months behind. Elena's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this situation. She knew they didn't have the kind of money these men were looking for. The pub had been struggling for months, barely staying afloat. Every spare penny had gone towards her father's medical bills. Look, she said, trying to sound reasonable. I know we owe you, but things have been tough. The pub's not doing well, and with my father's condition. She trailed off. The second biker, a bald man with tattoos covering his thick neck, laughed humorously. That's a real sad story, girl, but it don't change the fact that you owe us. Iron's been patient, but patience has its limits. Elena felt panic rising in her chest. She glanced at her father's room, imagining the mix of fear and anger in his eyes. If she had brought him inside earlier, he would be trying to speak, but his mouth would deny him the words. The picture broke her heart and steeled her resolve. Okay, she said, turning back to the bikers. I can give you what's in the register. It's not much, but it's all we have right now. The scarred biker exchanged a look with his companion, then shrugged. Show you, demanded with shaking hands. Elena opened the cash register. She pulled out the meager stack of bills, laying them on the bar. This is everything, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The bow biker snatched up the money quickly, counting it, his face twisted in disgust. This ain't even close to what you owe, Hespat. It's all we have, Elena insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. Please. You have to understand, we're doing the best we can. The scarred biker leaned across Theber, his face inches from Elena's. She could smell the stale cigarette smoke on his breath as he spoke. Maybe you're not hearing us clearly, girl. This isn't a negotiation. You pay what you owe, or there are consequences. Elena felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't give these men the satisfaction of seeing her agree. I've told you, she said, her voice stronger now, fueled by a mix of fear and danger. This is all we have. Take it or leave it. From his seat at the table, Iron had been watching the exchange with growing impatience. Now he stood at his chair, scraping loudly against Theffler. Enough of this, he growled. Mitch. Daryl searched the back room. There's got to be more cash stashed somewhere. Elena's eyes widened in panic. The back room was where her father slept, where they kept what few valuables they had left. No, she cried, moving to block Theodore. You can't go back there. He's resting, please. I'm telling you the truth. We don't have any thingles. Iron approached her slowly, his bulk looming over her smaller frame. Without warning, he reached out, grabbing her wrist in a bruising grip. Elena gasped in pain as he yanked at hair away from the door. Mitch, Daryl, get inside, Iron commanded, his voice carrying an edge of frustration. The two men nodded, moving towards the door with purposeful strides as the two bikers disappeared into the back room, Ion focused his attention on Alina, her small wrist still within his grip. Alina made one last desperate attempt to stop them, her small frame tempting to block their path to the door handles. Please, she begged, her voice cracking with emotion. There's nothing back there, you're wasting your time. You don't tell us what we can and can't do, your father has not paid us our due, and we'll get our money. One way or another, Ion snarled, then raising he shouted towards the back room. Frank, this is on you, you're late on payments, Frank, we might need to find other ways of payment soon. Alina struggled against Iron's grip. Please, she begged, don't hurt him, he's sick, he can't handle this kind of stress. Her struggle to break free from Iron's grip, Alina stumbled, her hip catching the edge of the bar. The impact sent a jolt of pain through her body, causing her to lose her balance. She reached out instinctively to steady herself, her hand catching the edge of the plate of nuts and crackers she had prepared for Jason. The plate tipped, then fell shattering on the floor with a crash that seemed deafening in the tense atmosphere of the pub. Nuts and crackers scattered across the worn wooden boards, mixing with shards of broken ceramic. For a moment, everyone froze. The sound of breaking glass had created a momentary distraction. A brief respite from the mounting tension. Iron released Elena's wrist, his attention drawn to the noisy mess on the floor, but with a growl of frustration, he turned and strode towards the back room, slamming door behind him. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed through the pub, a finality to it that sent a chill down Elena's spine. For a moment, she stood frozen, trapped outside the door, her mind racing with possibilities of what might be happening behind that closed door. Then, almost without conscious thought, she found herself moving towards it, pressing her ear against the worn wood. She could hear muffled voices, the sound of drawers being opened and closed, items being moved around, but there was no sound of violence, no crashes or thuds that might indicate they were hurting her father. It was small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. Please don't hurt him. Please just take what you want and go. But after several minutes of straining to hear of knocking softly on the door and receiving no response, Alina finally backed away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As she turned to survey the mess on the floor, almost mechanically, she began to clean up the broken glass and scattered food. The familiar motions of sweeping and mopping provided a strange sort of comfort, a mundane task to focus on amidst the chaos of the situation. As she worked, she could still hear fragments of conversation drifting through the thin walls. The men's voices were muffled, but she could catch bits and pieces, mostly taunting words directed at her father, but the absence of any sounds of violence offered some small comfort. She clung to the hope that they were just searching the room for extra money, as they had always done in the past when the floor was clean once. Alina found herself at a loss. The waiting was unbearable. The not knowing what was happening to her father, eating away at her in an attempt to distract herself to maintain some semblance of normally. She began preparing a fresh plate of nuts and crackers for Jason. Her movements were mechanical, her mind elsewhere. As she arranged the snacks on a new plate, when it was ready, she approached Jason's table in the corner, her steps hesitant. I'm so sorry about all this, she said, softly setting the plate down. You shouldn't have to witness any of this. Her voice steady as she apologized for the disturbance. Here's just a little something to go with your drink, she said. Jason looked up at her, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. That's very kind of you, thank you, he said. But who weareth those guys? He asked, his voice low and serious but laced with genuine interest. Alina sighed, the weight off their situation pressing down on her. My father borrowed money from them, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. We've been struggling to pay it back. Have they hurt you? Jason asked, his eyes flicking to her wrist, where the bruises from Iron's grip were already starting to show. Will they hurt your father? No. I don't think they would, Hitham, she said quietly. Those goons have been coming here every month looking for money, but they've never actually hurt us. But my father's weak, his heart might not be able to take their threats. Their brief exchange made it clear that these visits were a regular occurrence. Monthly events that had been happening for over a year. While threatening, they typically stopped just short of violence. Alina's tone was calm and measured, as though she had grown accustomed to these situations. If they hurt us, they would lose their income source, she explained, her tone carrying a practice.com that suggested long familiarity with such situations. So they just act threatened injits. Their way of motivating us to pay. Jason nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Alina could see that he wasn't entirely convinced by her explanation, but he didn't press Thaisu. I'm sorry again for the trouble, Alina said, gesturing to the plate of snacks. These are on the house. Please try to enjoy your evening despite all this. With that, she turned and walked back to the bar, leaving Jason to his thoughts. As she resumed her position behind the counter, her eyes fixed on the backroom door, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that this night was far from over. The worst she feared was yet to come. The minutes dragged on with agonizing slowness, each one stretching longer than the last. Alina paced behind the bar, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of a rag. She wasn't even aware she'd picked up. Her eyes darted between the closed door of the back room. The quiet coming from the room was both a relief and a source of growing dread. What were they doing in there? What were they saying to her father? The question swirled relentlessly in her mind, feeding the unease that tightened her chest. How long could they keep enduring this? How long could they maintain the facade of calm, pretending that this was just another part of their lives, another obstacle they'd learned to live with? Alina shook her head sharply, trying to dislodge the thoughts that threatened to consume her, unable to bear the tension any longer. Alina decided she needed to do something, anything, to occupy her mind and her hands. She mattered her way to the cleaning closet, the familiar routine offering a small measure of comfort. In the chaos of the evening, she donned her cleaning outfit. Over her clothes, the well-worn fabric feeling like armor. Against the uncertainty of the situation, gathering a mop, pail, and floor brush, she headed towards the bathroom. The routine tasks of cleaning would provide a semblance of normalcy, a way to maintain control in a situation that felt increasingly out of her hands. As she pushed open the bathroom door, the harsh fluorescent lights flickered to life, casting stark shadows across the tiled floor. Alina set to work scrubbing at imaginary stains with a ferocity born of fear and frustration. The rhythmic motion of the brush against the floor tiles became almost meditative, allowing her mind to momentarily escape the stress of the situation. She was so engrossed in her task that she didn't hear the bathroom door open. It wasn't until she heard voices that she realized was no longer alone. Iron's still in there with the old man. Mitch's voice cut through the silence. Don't know what he thinks he's going to get out of him. You know how Iron is, Daryl replied, his tone dismissive. He likes to play the long game. Figures if he can break the old man, we'll have a steady income stream for years. Alina froze, her brush hovering above the floor. She was hidden from view in one of the stools, and the men seemed unaware of her presence. She held her breath, straining to hear every word. Yeah, but what's the point? Mitch grumbled. That old man, he can't even talk or move. How is he supposed to pay us? Daryl chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. You're missing the point, Mitch. It's not about the old man. It's about the daughter. She's the one who will do anything to protect her dad. That's where the money is. Alina felt her blood run cold. At Daryl's words, she had always known on some level that she was the real target of their intimidation. But hearing it stated so boldly, so callously, made her feel sick to her stomach. I guess Mitch Considine still seems like a waste of time to me. We could just take what we want and go save us all and that's why Iron's the leader, and you're not, Daryl said, his tone mocking. You start robbing every place in the area, soon enough we'll have the cops on our tail. This way we keep a steady income and everyone's too scared to talk. It's smart business. Their casual discussion off their leaders' methods exposed the calculated nature of their operation. This wasn't just random thuggery. It was a systematic exploitation of vulnerable people. The realization made Alina feel even more trapped, more hopeless. She was so caught up in her thoughts that she didn't realize she had let out a small gasp until it was too late. The sound thou quiet seemed to echo in the tiled bathroom well, while Mitch's voice took on a predatory tone. Look what we found. There's a damsel in the toilet. Alina straightened up, forcing herself to meet their gaze. As she emerged from the stall, she tried to keep her expression neutral to not show the fear that was coursing through her veins. The damsel has guts, Mitch said to Daryl, his eyes never leaving Alina. Then with a sudden movement, he kicked over her cleaning bucket. Dirty water spread across the floor, undoing all of Alina's hard work. Both men laughed as they intentionally splashed the dirty water onto her shoes. Their amusement at her distress grew as she attempted to maintain her composure, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing Harry act. But inside, Alina was crumbling. The stress of the evening, the fear for her father, and now this deliberate it was all too much. She could feel tears welling up in her eyes. Her carefully maintained facade of strength began to crack, unable to contain her emotions any longer. Elena filled the bathroom, the men's mocking laughter following her out into the corridor. She stumbled to a stop just outside the door, sliding down the wall to huddle in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees as she tried to muffle her sobs. The night that had started so ordinarily had turned into a nightmare. Alina found herself wishing desperately for it all to be over, but as she sat there trying to gather the strength to face whatever came next, she had no idea that the worst was yet to come. Alina wasn't sure how long she had been huddled in the corner of the bathroom walkway when she heard footsteps approaching. Her heart rate spiked, fear coursing through her veins at the thought that Mitch and Daryl might have come back to torment her further. But when she looked up, she was surprised to see Jason Statham standing there, concern etched on his face. Are you all right? He asked, his voice low and gentle. His eyes flickered to her wet shoes and